Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point, and we are here to talk about the Justice for R. Kelly rally that took place this weekend in Chicago, Illinois. And so for those of you who may be wondering why is there a protest for R. Kelly, it's because people want to bring awareness to the injustices that are happening in this case against Robert Sylvester Kelly in the Eastern District of New York, the Northern District of Illinois, and in the Cook County state case. And so R. Kelly does still have millions of fans. You know, despite the Mute R. Kelly movement, R. Kelly has over 5 million streams a month on Spotify alone. And so when you figure in all the other streaming software and platforms that are out there, there are definitely a lot of people that are still following his music, despite what they may feel about the allegations and the charges against him. And you guys know that most of this came about from the RSK docuseries that took place on Lifetime Television, where mainly women from 20, 30 years ago were interviewed, and they talked about allegations that they have against him. You guys know in 2008, he went to trial and was acquitted on all charges against him. And so the state of Illinois, Cook County in Illinois, has brought up those same charges again. They're basically, in my opinion, I mean, I'm not a lawyer or an expert. It seems like double jeopardy to me in some of those cases. The state attorney for Cook County put out an 800 number asking for people to come forward, even though he had not been charged with a crime. And so there's an argument where people say, oh, well, you know, I see people do that all the time. Well, that's not the case. Usually a person is charged with a crime or they're arrested for a crime, and then the sheriff or the prosecutors or whoever will make a plea that if there are any other victims out there, please come forward. But in this case, Kim Foxx, who is the state prosecutor in Cook County, she watched this docuseries and then made a public plea for people to come forward, even though this man had not been charged with anything. And as a result, there were people who had already made allegations against him that came forward, but there were really no new people that came forward. And so they are painting him as a monster, you know, as a predator and all of these things. And so if you've been following my channel for a while, you know I have been covering this case and just mainly pointing out the legalities of it, pointing out discrepancies, because this has really turned into a witch hunt. There's just a lot of things going on with this case that just doesn't sit right. And so people will say, oh, well, you're defending, you know, this abuser, you know, what about the women? And from my perspective, it is, people deserve a fair trial. Like, you are violating this man, like 3 or 4 of his amendments are being violated. Some of the motions that the lawyers have filed have actually argued, you know, talking about the various constitutional amendments that we are entitled to as citizens of the United States for a fair trial, that these prosecutors are violating. And then so much has come out about the latest person in the indictment in New York, which is Azriel Clary, and how her being in his presence had, you know, she's lived with him for like 4 years. And so now her whole story is unraveling and coming apart, and learning that it was a setup. So there's so much going on. And so that was just a preface to what's going on now with these marches. And so this was the second march that was taking place on his behalf in Chicago. And when the first march took place last month, the organizers received a lot of criticism, and people were saying that their messaging was wrong. Why would you march on the weekend when there's nobody out, nobody to see your message? Why aren't you passing out literature to the people along the street? And so they, were not deterred. They decided they were going to march again. And so the latest march took place on Friday and Saturday. And so on Friday, it was good that they got out on a weekday when there's more people downtown. They marched to the MCC. And one thing that I always said when I was watching the previous rally was and actually, let me take that back. The rally that took place this weekend and last month was organized by the same people. But a year ago, when R. Kelly was first arrested, there were a couple of other marches that took place. So these were actually the third and fourth marches that have taken place on his behalf. And then there's supposed to be one in New York next month by another group of people. So one of the things that I thought from the last march was, I agree with why are you doing on the weekend when there's nobody downtown. So I was grateful that they did take it to the streets on Friday when there was more people downtown. They actually ended up going to Kim Foxx's office, said their piece, in front of her office. And then several reporters showed up. Not sure what organizations they were with, but they did interview Dubosky Gunn. He has a channel here on YouTube if you guys want to go check him out. And they interviewed him as to why he was doing that. And so there were other YouTubers that still were not satisfied. They were still complaining, still criticizing their tactics. And so, several people on the street, because there were more people out, there were more people that recorded them marching by, that went to social media. And so it sparked a conversation, which is what it all boils down to. And so another YouTuber, was complaining like, oh, you're getting all this negative press. This didn't make any sense. You're making R. Kelly look bad. But here's the tea. You guys remember the Popeyes chicken rant that went on? It was like a social media sensation. Everybody was talking about Popeyes. People lined up, people fighting in line, carrying on about this doggone chicken sandwich. Okay, that whole campaign started out with Popeyes just, advertising their new chicken sandwich. And then the other franchises, Chick-fil-A and Wendy's, tried to come at Popeyes about these chicken sandwiches, right? And when it was all over, said and done, Popeyes earned what is estimated to be over $50 million in free advertisement from that publicity stunt, from engaging with the opposition, arguing about whose chicken sandwich was the best. And so that's similar to what is going on with this rally. So the people that were saying, nobody saw you, what was the point? You didn't get anybody to interview you. Well, what they did get was the story ended up on the Shade Room. And as of right now, the post on the Shade Room has over 856,000 views. There's 10,000 comments, and granted, 90% of those comments are negative. Okay, but what about the other 846,000 people that haven't commented? You don't know what their feelings are. You don't know if their opinions about the whole case has changed or not. And then by it being on the Shade Room, now you have other bloggers and other, smaller news sites that are picking it up. And so one of those sites is the Hip Hop News blog site. And so whereas people are making negative comments, there are also people, the story is kind of like changing. And we even see that with Vlad TV. Every time DJ Vlad interviews somebody on his channel, he always has to bring R. Kelly's name up and ask them their opinion. And if you pay attention, even though some people are still trying to be shady, you can tell that the tide is turning and people's opinions are starting to change and say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on with this case? And then DJ Vlad also has a website, Vlad TV, and he actually did a story on the march. And then here's what the hip hop news people said. They say things have not been looking good for R. Kelly for a long time now. Though the allegations have been going on for decades, law officials are making it clear that they're aiming to put him behind bars once and for all. And after a rather large majority of people are hoping the outcome leads to the embattled singer spending his remaining days in prison, it seems like there's still a strong vocal group fighting for his freedom. Footage emerged earlier today of alleged Free R. Kelly protests happening in Chicago. Men and women gathered through the streets demanding justice for the singer as well as his freedom. The chants varied from Free R. Kelly to Where Were the Parents, while carrying a massive banner reading Justice for R. Kelly. The protests arrived days after Kelly's lawyer filed another motion to the judge complaining about the possibility of his case being pushed back. The trial date is set to October 20th, 2020, but due to COVID, there's a chance it might be delayed even further. They cite primarily that pandemic and its related difficulties, including the need to quarantine witnesses and the difficulties associated with the trial of this magnitude in the current environment is not going to work. And so I actually reported about the motion that the Chicago Northern District of Illinois filed, asking for a delay. That delay was granted. And then the Eastern District of New York, the next, a few days later, came up and also said that their case was going to be delayed. And to be honest with you, I don't think anybody thought that these cases were going to be tried as quickly as they were trying to say, because they were originally scheduled for April and May. Then they got pushed to September and October. And one telling sign that it wasn't going to happen is they're claiming that these cases will take 4 to 6 weeks, but the trials were scheduled 2 to 3 weeks apart. So that was a sign right there that they weren't going to happen. Now there are no new dates, and they're probably just going to drag this on until they beat him down to the point where he'll just accept a plea bargain, plead guilty to something, which is how the federal courts get their high conviction rate. And I know a lot of people think that, the feds are just awesome and amazing and they have their ish together. No, the feds know how to beat people down. They keep you locked up for 3 years, awaiting trial, and then they come back and say, okay, well, if you plead guilty, then we'll drop the charge from this down to this, and then you'll get 4 years, and then you serve another year. And that's pretty much how they have their high conviction rate. And so when you hear about minimum sentencing guidelines, that's really a tactic to get people to plead. It's not saying that this crime deserves a minimum charge of 10 years up to 50 years. They're just basically giving you a charge and saying, okay, your minimum time served is going to be 10 years, but we really can give you more. And then after they delay prosecuting you and you've sat in jail for 3 years, then all of a sudden it's okay, well, we'll offer you a lesser charge with 4 years. And then the person says, okay, well, I'll plead guilty. I've already been here 3 years. I can do another year. Then the article shows footage of the march. And so there were other blog sites that picked up the story. Like I said, I haven't seen, like the Chicago Sun-Times or anyone pick up and talk about the protest. But, in response to the critics from the last time, they did get coverage. Although over 800,000 people heard about the rally on the Shade Room, that is a great number, but it's hard to tell the demographics of who those 800 and some thousand people are. So if it were to get picked up by mainstream media, then that population, that demographic watching the actual 6 o'clock news is people who are more likely to be chosen for jury selection. And so I say kudos, mission accomplished. You wanted to get your message out, you wanted to be seen by more people, and that's exactly what happened. So go ahead, leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.